Hello everyone, my name is Dee and welcome to Books and Quirks. Today it's Friday, so it's time for a Friday Reads. I know it's been a couple of weeks, but I was actually away on business for quite a while, so I was still managed to get a lot of reading in. Although I didn't read while I was away, I managed to read, a lot on the weekends and things like that. So let me just get right to it, tell you the rest of the books that I finished in the month of October and what I'll be reading this week now that it's November. Okay, so let me just get right in. So the last time we spoke, I said that I was about to start or in the middle of a book called How to Hang a Witch. And this book is written by Adriana Mather, who is a descendant of Cotton Mather. And if you don't know who Cotton Mather is, he was a big player in the accusations against the accused women during the Salem witch trials. So this was actually the best book that I read in the month of October. Now, I read a lot of good ones, but How to Hang a Witch was the best. It's a YA book about a young girl named Samantha Mather, who is a descendant of Cotton Mather. So I guess she based that girl, the author based that girl off of herself maybe a little bit. And it takes place in Salem, Massachusetts, and it follows all of the descendants. So not only Samantha Mather, who is our main character, but also all of the descendants of all of the accused women. And there is a kind of prophecy that if all of the descendants are kind of together at one time in this town, kind of a curse manifests in a way, and descendants start dying. And Samantha kind of fulfills that prophecy because at the beginning of the book, she moves to Salem. So that's how the story kind of gets going at the very beginning. It was such a fun read. I mean, it wasn't necessarily scary. I mean, there were some, of course, creepy sections, that fit the whole month of October, but it wasn't scary, but it was still very good. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed myself. It was a very short book. All of the books that I read were pretty short. This was, I think, just 300 pages, and I just thought it was so good. But I personally love anything having to do with the Salem witch trials. I find that part of history fascinating, and I've read books by other descendants. Like I've read books by Catherine Howe, who was a descendant of one of the accused women. So yeah, it was a very good book, in my opinion. The next book that I finished was Craven Manor by Darcy Coates. This was my first novel that I read by Darcy Coates, and she writes a lot of novels about, haunted houses and things like that. And this was a really good book. It wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be. However, I really enjoyed myself. So this book follows Daniel, who is kind of down on his luck. He was homeless at one point. He's, at the beginning of the book when you meet him, he's living with his cousin, and he's really hard up, kind of looking for a job. And he receives a very cryptic letter that kind of is slipped under his door one day. And it offers him a job to be a caretaker of a big kind of mansion, and it just kind of is very cryptic. It doesn't give him an address, it just kind of gives him directions, and he has to kind of show up at this house. And when he shows up at this house, it's very it's in like a very rural area. It's seemingly abandoned. It's covered in layers upon layers of dust and leaves, and it's kind of dilapidated and falling apart. And he gets another letter that's on the floor of the house, because when he gets there, the front doors are open. And it gives him more cryptic messages, like it gives him his first payment up front and says that he can live in the cottage house on the property, and which is this little cottage, separate from the main house. And gives him explicit directions like, here's your first payment. You can live in the cottage. make sure that you are in the cottage between midnight and dawn. Keep the curtains drawn, and if you hear any knocking on the cottage door, don't answer it. It's so weird. I mean, so it did have, I mean, although it wasn't scary, it did have really a creepiness factor to it. And that's what I really loved about this book. And yeah, it just, so he starts to take care of the property, and weird things start happening at night. So that's really all I'm going to say without spoiling it. I really loved this book. I plan to read more by this author. You know, maybe I'll save them all for next October. I don't know, because I love to read these types of books in October. But yeah, it was a really good book in my opinion. Really short, like under 300 pages. I think it was only like 260 or something like that. Really tiny book, but good nonetheless. The next two books that I read were part of the Three Dark Crowns series. I'm assuming that's just the name of the series too. But this is the first book, called Three Dark Crowns, and I read the second book, which is One Dark Throne. And yeah, I really am loving this. There are 4 books of the series, and I do plan to go on to the 3rd book. I have a hold on it at my library, actually, so that should be coming in a couple of weeks. So this book is really good. It follows 3 sisters, 3 queens. They're triplets who are born, triplets are born to this kingdom, once every generation, and each of the 3 triplets has a power. So there's Mirabella, who is an elemental. She can control, earth, all of the elements, earth, fire, water, those kinds of things. There is Arsinoe, who is a naturalist, so she can control things in nature, make things grow, and naturalists also have a familiar. So Arsinoe is kind of looking for her familiar. Catherine is a poisoner. So that means a poisoner is somebody who can ingest poisons without getting any effects whatsoever. And they're also very skilled at making poisons. So these 3 triplets were separated at the age of 6 and each taken to a different kingdom. Catherine is taken to the poisoners, Arsinoe is taken to the naturalists, and Mirabella is taken to the elementals, and they're kind of trained from that age, not only in their craft, but in their destiny. So their destiny is that when they're 16, they need to battle it out for the crown, and the sole survivor will be the queen until the next generation of triplets comes about. So I love this book. This is another YA series, and I just love the concept of this, and the struggle that these 3 girls go through. You get each of their perspectives. So there are chapters with, each of the 3 girls' perspectives. So you really get to see inside, each of their worlds, inside each of their minds. And I really came to care about these characters. And things really go down in the second book. So this is the first book. It's a lot of setup. So I will warn you that if you're going to give this book a try, the first book is very slow going. Now, I personally didn't mind that because I loved learning about the 3 girls and their different gifts and their worlds and their struggles. But a lot of people I know found this book to be very slow. So I don't know. It's just up to you whether you would enjoy this or not. The action really starts at least in the first book, only in the last 50 pages or so. The second book has a lot more action though. So I really loved this book as well as the second book, and yeah, I cannot wait to get to the 3rd. And the 4th, I think, just came out or is about to come out. So that means I don't have to wait to get my hands on another book, because that always happens with series, I always have a hard time waiting, and then I forget what happens. So that won't happen with this series. The last book I read was The Witches of BlackBrook, which is the first book in a series, and it is by Tish Thar. This is another Salem Witch Trials book about three girls who are, or three sisters, where one sister is accused of being a witch and hung during the Salem Witch Trials. And she kind of casts a curse, not a curse, she kind of casts a spell on, while she's about to be hung, that her and her sisters will sort of reincarnate in the future so that they can find one another and live out their lives, that they will live kind of forever in that way. I thought this was okay. I didn't really enjoy a lot of this book. I didn't think that it was that well written. It was kind of, the dialogue and everything seemed very stilted and unnatural. But I finished the book. I thought it was just okay. I wound up giving it 3 stars, but in actuality, if I could give halves, it would probably be more like a 2.5 star. So yeah, I mean, this book, so it follows these 3 sisters. In the beginning of the book, you get to see the oldest sister hung for witchcraft as her younger sisters watch. And then you see them, today, in today's society, reincarnated and looking for one another. And there's also an evil presence that kind of followed her or attached itself to her when she cast her spell, and that is after them as well. So like I said, I thought the concept was really good. I did want to see what happened to these 3 women, but it was just very strange. The dialogue and everything just seemed very stilted. I don't know how else to describe it, but yeah, I mean, so I won't go on in the series. Each book in the series can actually be read as a standalone, so it's not like a continuation of events, I don't think. Because I know I read some reviews of people that read like the second book and they didn't need to read the first book to kind of get what was happening. So yeah, that was the last book that I read in the month of October, and I finished that a couple days ago. So that is all I have for you. Those are all of the books that I finished in the month of October. The only book that I'm currently reading now is a nonfiction book for Nonfiction November called Empty Mansions. And I'm going to speak about more in my November TBR, which I plan to film today as well. But that is a book about a heiress who lived in the 1800s, who was very eccentric, very much a recluse, and it's about her life in that sort of Gilded Age, in that time period, when there were all of the big industrialists like Rockefeller and Vanderbilt and all of those types of big rich men men who made it rich. So I just started that last night. So it's an audiobook, so it's going to take me a while to get through. But I don't know what else I'm going to pick up this week, but that is really all I have for right now. So anyway, I hope you're all having a very good week. I hope you all had a very happy Halloween, and I will see you all very, very soon. Bye.